I'm delighted to have this opportunity to thank the people of Flanders, and especially Ypres and members of the Outpaced Association, for continuing to honour the sacrifice of our
90 years of age, recently widowed, visibly weakened by time itself, he arrived at the most sacred public gathering in the British royal calendar. And right there, in full sight of every senior royal present, he turned his body away from the Queen of England. It wasn't hesitant or shaky like an old man confused by the moment. It was sharp, aware, and fully intentional. He saw her clearly, recognized exactly who she was, and still chose to turn away as if she didn't carry a crown, as if she wasn't standing just a few steps from him, as if she didn't matter at all. That instant dropped a heavy silence across the cenotaph that felt louder than any sound that morning in 2025. And that moment wasn't the end of it either, because right after turning away from Camilla, the Duke of Kent shifted his attention toward Catherine. He reached for her hand, holding it longer than what etiquette would ever allow, creating a pause that felt loaded with meaning. Then, he leaned in close, speaking words meant only for her ears, words that would later be pieced together through careful whispers from those close to the household. Those words weren't casual at all. They carried weight, direction, and finality, and when Camilla eventually learned what was said, she reportedly went straight to King Charles, demanding action. But Charles listened and refused to intervene. That refusal set off a chain that would change how everything around royal legacy, inheritance, and loyalty was viewed inside those walls. To understand the full force of that cenotaph moment, you have to understand the man behind it. Because without that, it just looks like an old royal shifting position at a ceremony. But underneath it, something much deeper had been building for decades. Prince Edward, the Duke of Kent, has carried his title for more than 8 decades, making him one of the longest-serving dukes in British history. Alongside King Charles, he stands among the very few royals who have reached the rank of Field Marshal in the British Army. His life has stretched across eras: wars, coronations, scandals, and royal reinventions. He has witnessed kings passing and queens ascending. He has seen the monarchy bend under pressure from the modern world while still trying to preserve its traditions. He sat in rooms where decisions shaped history, where silence was not weakness but discipline, and where what was said never left the room again. For most of his life, he mastered that silence completely. He served, he appeared, he followed duty without stepping outside the lines. But at the National Service of Remembrance, something in that long-held restraint cracked open just slightly. He knew that moment carried weight. He knew cameras were watching every senior royal, and he knew that any movement, any gesture, would be remembered. Still, he chose that exact moment with precision that felt anything but accidental, because the feeling behind it had been building for years. Not overnight, not suddenly, but slowly, over decades of observation, memory, and unspoken judgment that never fully faded. At the center of that long emotional history was Princess Marina's legacy. The Duke's mother, Princess Marina of Greece and Denmark, carried bloodlines tied deeply to European royal history, including the tragic fall of the Romanov dynasty. That heritage wasn't just symbolic, it was tied to jewelry, identity, and survival across generations. Pieces like the Cambridge sapphire parure, the Kent pearl festoon tiara, diamond girandole earrings, and other historic royal jewels weren't just accessories. They were living fragments of history that survived wars, collapse, and financial strain that forced painful decisions within the family. Some of those treasures were sold over time, this sapphire tiara, necklaces, and other heirlooms disappearing into private hands, possibly never to return to Britain again. What remained became a fragile reminder of what once was, held in memory more than in physical form. And standing there at the cenotaph, the Duke of Kent wasn't just a man at a ceremony, he was someone carrying the final threads of that lineage, aware that history doesn't always stay intact. It breaks, scatters, and survives only in fragments. But history wasn't the only weight he carried into that day. There was also Diana. As a senior royal during the collapse of Charles and Diana's marriage, the the Duke of Kent witnessed the emotional storms surrounding the couple from close proximity. He saw the tension, the pressure, and the unbearable public scrutiny that surrounded her life inside the institution. Diana's struggles were widely discussed in private circles, and though many details were never publicly confirmed in full, what was clear was her emotional distress and the intense pressure she lived under. Reports from that era described a woman overwhelmed, isolated, and constantly under emotional strain within palace life. These experiences shaped how people inside the royal environment remembered that period, especially those who watched it unfold without ever stepping in to fully change its course. And over time, that memory became part of how the Duke viewed the system itself, not just individuals, but the structure that surrounded them. There was also another layer tied directly to his own life. The Duchess of Kent, Catherine, lived a very different but equally complex royal path. Known for her quiet nature, she experienced serious personal struggles in the past, including a period of mental health difficulty in the 1970s that led her away from public duties for a time. She later chose a deeply personal spiritual path, converting to Catholicism, a decision that placed her in a unique position within the royal landscape. While she continued her life of service, she often remained distant from the spotlight, carrying experiences that shaped her in private ways. But inside certain social circles tied to the royal world, her name was sometimes spoken carelessly. According to accounts from former staff, there were moments where her struggles were discussed in dismissive tones, even treated as gossip rather than lived experience. That kind of treatment didn't stay hidden forever. Word traveled, and eventually it reached the Duke himself. And for him, that changed everything. Because it wasn't just about Diana anymore. It was about how suffering, loyalty, and vulnerability were treated within the system he had served all his life. From that point forward, the emotional distance between the Duke of Kent and Camilla Parker Bowles hardened into something unmovable. What had once been quiet tension became a complete fracture that never softened again. The feeling wasn't just coldness anymore. It shifted into something far heavier, like a complete emotional shutdown that never reopened again. It was not frostiness. It was not distance. It was a permanent closure, a door that shut completely and never opened again. And then everything escalated the moment the jewelry situation entered the picture. And that's where Camilla reportedly pushed things too far. The jewelry war Camilla started after Queen Elizabeth II's death and state funeral. The entire inventory of the Queen's personal jewelry collection was carefully reviewed, and official allocations were made across members of the royal family. Every decision carried weight, history, and silent tension behind closed doors. Catherine, Princess of Wales, had quietly shown interest in a diamond brooch that held deep emotional meaning for her. It wasn't just jewelry, it was tied to moments involving Diana, worn during public appearances and remembered through archival images that Catherine had studied and admired. That brooch wasn't just decoration, it symbolized something emotional, almost personal, something Catherine connected to in a deeply sincere way that went beyond public duty or appearances. It was something she felt genuinely and showed consistently through every choice she made about what to wear and when to wear it. Like every outfit carried a message without a single word spoken. But when decisions were finalized, that same brooch was assigned to Queen Camilla instead. Catherine was simply told it had already been taken, leaving no room for discussion or appeal. She said nothing publicly at all. No statements, no interviews, no subtle leaks to the press, just silence that said more than words ever could. But in the days that followed, those closest to her noticed the shift immediately. Something in her presence changed in a way that couldn't be hidden or disguised. She appeared visibly drained during engagements that week, as if something emotionally heavy had been placed on her shoulders and refused to lift. Staff who observed her closely reported swollen eyes on more than one occasion, a detail that spoke louder than any official explanation ever could. She carried it the same way she carries every private burden, quietly, without complaint, without letting the outside world see the full weight of it. But everyone around her could feel it clearly. Something had cracked emotionally, even if nothing was ever said aloud. Then came the state banquet in 2023, where another flashpoint quietly formed behind palace procedure. Catherine, Princess of Wales's team, submitted a formal request through the Lord Chamberlain's office for access to a Queen Mary tiara from the royal collection. It was a carefully handled official request following tradition and protocol. The response came back denied. The tiara had already been allocated to Camilla for another engagement scheduled in the same week. Sources close to both households suggested the timing of those overlapping requests created tension that didn't feel random to those involved, adding to a growing sense of quiet rivalry inside royal scheduling decisions. And then Camilla reportedly said something that should never have left the private space it was spoken in. At a semi-private dinner with close associates, she allegedly described Catherine's consistent use of Diana-linked jewelry as nothing more than performance. Her tone, according to accounts, carried open contempt, as if the judgment was already final in her mind. Catherine was not honoring Diana's memory, Camilla told everyone there. She was exploiting public grief to manufacture sympathy. And then came the line that made several people visibly uncomfortable in the room. She is using a dead woman as a costume. She said it openly, without hesitation, in front of people who understood instantly the weight of what had just been said. When those remarks eventually reached Prince William, the reaction between the two households reportedly turned icy and deeply strained, marking one of the most difficult exchanges in years. And every fragment of that tension eventually reached the Duke of Kent as well, feeding into a long-building sense of judgment and memory that had never fully faded. He watched Camilla navigate the distribution of Queen Elizabeth II's jewelry after her passing with increasing discomfort, as if history itself was being rearranged in real time. At the same time, he saw Catherine endure emotional pressure in silence, never publicly breaking, never responding in anger, just absorbing everything with quiet restraint. To him, it mirrored patterns he had seen before. Familiar emotional cycles repeating across decades, across different women, across the same institution. And that's when the decision fully formed. Not suddenly at the cenotaph, but long before it. The cenotaph moment in November 2025 at the National Service of Remembrance simply became the point where it was finally made visible. The ceremony itself was one of the most solemn in the royal calendar. Cameras were present everywhere, and every senior royal stood under public scrutiny. The Duke of Kent stood supported by Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, his health visibly declining, his physical condition clearly fragile. Many there understood it could be one of his final appearances at such an event, and that understanding added weight to every movement he made. When Camilla came within range, he turned away completely. No hesitation, no confusion, just a clear rejection of acknowledgement. Then he moved directly toward Catherine, taking her hand and holding it longer than protocol would normally allow, creating a moment that felt intentionally charged and deeply symbolic. He leaned in and spoke words that witnesses later tried to reconstruct from fragments of recollection. He told her the jewels were going where they belonged. He told her that his mother's legacy would not end up in the wrong hands or stripped of its meaning. He never said Camilla's name once, but he didn't need to. Everyone present understood exactly who the message was directed at. The atmosphere shifted immediately, as if something long unspoken had finally broken into the open air. Camilla learned of the moment quickly, and by the end of the day, the full account had already circulated back to her, and she was not calm about it. That evening, she went directly to King Charles III. She did not arrive emotionally distressed. She arrived structured, deliberate, and firm, framing the moment as an institutional issue rather than a personal one. She argued that the Duke's actions disrupted royal hierarchy, especially given the symbolism of the cenotaph and its public visibility. Charles listened carefully, as he often does in matters involving Camilla, but this time, he did not intervene. He simply acknowledged her position and stated that the Duke of Kent was entitled to his own private judgment. And that was the end of the discussion. Camilla left without responding, and those familiar with her understood immediately that her silence was not acceptance. It was the calm before a much deeper shift forming underneath the surface. But here is the part. Camilla completely miscalculated when she tried to build her argument, and it changes everything in a serious way. The Duke of Kent's jewels were never hers to claim, in any sense, and no royal system anywhere supports that idea at all. The pieces he holds are private property, not part of some shared royal vault or collective inheritance. They are not the crown jewels that move from sovereign to sovereign in a strict line of tradition, and they are not part of the royal collection that belongs to the institution itself. They belong to the Duke personally, and that means he has full control over them, with the freedom to gift them, sell them, or leave them in a will to absolutely anyone he chooses, with zero obligation to Camilla or even the Queen of England herself. Camilla's position inside the monarchy was already locked in place, fully documented and publicly recognized, and there was no question about her official standing at all. She had already been crowned in May 2023, wearing a remodeled crown that contained Cullinan diamonds, a symbol of authority that the entire world had seen clearly. In January 2025, that same crown was officially renamed Queen Camilla's crown, marking her place in the structure of the monarchy in a permanent way. Her jewelry arrangements for her reign were already set, fully established, and nobody inside the institution was challenging any of it at that point. But here is the twist that cuts deeper than titles or crowns or public recognition ever could. A crown on paper and a name attached to a piece of royal history mean absolutely nothing if the people who have lived inside that institution for decades look at you and feel nothing at all when you walk into the room. And that is exactly what was eating away at Camilla behind the scenes. Even when everything on the surface looked secure and stable, Charles, refusing to step in for Camilla, revealed something much bigger than a simple disagreement inside the palace. It exposed the real weight of the Duke of Kent's influence, even at 90 years old, even after decades of royal service that cannot be erased or ignored. The Duke is not someone Charles can silence with a phone call or smooth over with a private conversation behind closed doors. He comes from a generation of Windsors who existed long before Charles ever created the controversies that nearly broke the monarchy apart. Before the affair with Camilla, before the public collapse of trust surrounding Diana, before the divorce that shocked the nation and the world, there were men like the Duke of Kent who lived by a different code entirely. They placed the crown above personal desire, above comfort, above everything that could benefit them individually. They carried that responsibility without asking for praise or recognition, and they did it in silence and discipline that defined an era. Charles did not always follow that path, and the consequences of that difference were witnessed by the entire world. The Duke of Kent saw all of it unfold from inside the institution itself, and that memory never disappears between men who share that kind of history. Every time Charles enters a room where the Duke is present, there is an unspoken awareness between them, something heavy that cannot be ignored or softened. Charles knows the Duke remembers everything, every decision, every scandal, every moment that reshaped the monarchy's public image. He remembers Diana, he remembers the affair, and he remembers how the institution chose survival over compassion in moments that cannot be undone. That kind of memory becomes power on its own, and no title can erase it. Charles saw Camilla's request, understood what she wanted, but ultimately chose not to intervene and allowed the Duke of Kent to stand firm. And that decision opens up a much deeper question that most people never consider at all. Because if Catherine does not receive these jewels, they do not automatically return to the crown or enter the royal collection as people assume. They do not go back into rotation for coronations, state banquets, trooping the colour, or Wimbledon appearances. Instead, they pass down a completely different path toward George, Earl of St. Andrews, the Duke's eldest son and heir to the dukedom. But there is a complication that changes everything about their future. George married a Catholic, which removes him entirely from the line of succession, and that alone changes how the entire inheritance structure plays out. His wife holds no royal standing within official duties. Lord Nicholas, the Duke's younger son, also converted to Catholicism and was removed from succession as well. Lady Helen Taylor lives a private life away from royal duties entirely. None of the Duke's children are working royals. None of them appear at official events where royal jewelry becomes part of living history instead of stored heritage. And that means if these pieces pass into their hands, they disappear from the public royal system completely. The Cambridge sapphire fragments, the Kent pearl festoon tiara, the diamond girandole earrings, the pearl fringe tiara, and the remodeled diamond bandeau would all end up in private homes, locked away, unseen, removed from the royal narrative that once gave them meaning. And that creates a permanent break in history that cannot be reversed easily. The last visible connection to Princess Marina, a woman tied to Romanov heritage, a woman who survived the collapse of empires and carried those jewels through some of the darkest years of the 20th century, would effectively vanish from royal circulation forever. The Duke of Kent understood this problem for years, and he did not respond emotionally. He responded with something colder and more final, a practical decision shaped by decades of watching how history survives or disappears depending on who holds it. The Cambridge sapphires themselves carry a lineage that stretches far beyond modern royal disputes. They began with Princess Augusta, Duchess of Cambridge in the 19th century, then passed to Queen Mary after Augusta's death in 1916. Later, Queen Mary gave them to Marina as a wedding gift in 1934, continuing a chain that spans more than 2 centuries of royal women carrying the same history forward. Now, consider the weight of that name, Cambridge, and what it means in the present moment. It was the first title held by William and Catherine when they married in 2011, linking the past and present in a way that feels almost deliberate in hindsight. The Duke of Kent, at 90 years old and still fully aware and sharp, understands exactly what that continuity represents. If those sapphires go to Catherine, it is not just inheritance. It is a restoration of a historical line that runs through grief, war, survival, and survival again across generations, a thread that refuses to break. And the Duke is choosing to be the one who ensures that thread does not end in silence or storage or private obscurity where history goes unseen. Because Catherine has shown something rare inside the monarchy, something that cannot be taught or manufactured or assigned by protocol. She treats royal jewelry as living history, not decoration. When she wears the Cambridge Lover's Knot tiara at state events, it is not just fashion, it is memory. When she wears Queen Elizabeth's Bahrain pearl earrings, it is not just elegance, it is presence. She carries meaning into every room in a way people feel instantly. That kind of presence cannot be created by styling teams or advisors or institutional planning. It either exists in the person or it does not, and the public can see the difference immediately. Even Camilla, despite her position and titles and decades inside the system, has never produced the same emotional response when wearing historic pieces tied to Diana, Queen Mary, or past queens of the monarchy. The difference is visible and, more importantly, it is felt. Then came the moment, in 2024, that reportedly sealed everything in the Duke's mind: Catherine's cancer diagnosis, the surgery, and the long silence that followed while speculation grew outside the palace. It was a period filled with isolation, pressure, and uncertainty, where she carried illness while also carrying global attention on her every move. Then came her return, slow and careful, stepping back into public life at Windsor and later at Trooping. The bar, colour. She did not return as performance, she returned as endurance made visible. The Duke of Kent had already watched decades of royal pain unfold, from Diana's suffering to internal family fractures, and he had seen how silence often replaced protection. Watching Catherine go through her illness and return changed something final in his thinking. He had seen enough to make a decision that was no longer about tradition alone, but about continuity. survival of meaning, and where history should physically live. The Kent pearl festoon tiara has not been seen publicly in decades. The diamond girandole earrings tied to Marina's collection have been absent from major events for years. These pieces exist, but their meaning has been paused in storage, waiting for someone who can bring them back into living history. If Catherine wears them, they do not remain static objects. They become continuation, not memory frozen in time, but memory activated in the present. The Duke of Kent, nearing the final chapter of his life, stood at the cenotaph in November 2025, and in that moment, everything aligned into a final decision. A man who had spent 9 decades observing, serving, and remaining silent chose to act in a way that would define the closing chapter of his life. He did not send a statement. He did not write a letter. He did not go through quiet institutional channels. Instead, at a moment of national remembrance, he made his position clear in a way only a few understood. The jewels are going where they belong. And with that, the direction of history inside the monarchy shifted in a way no formal protocol could reverse. Camilla may react in frustration, Charles may remain silent, and the institution may avoid direct comment. But the decision stands on its own weight now, because the Duke of Kent has already made the choice, and he made it in public at a moment that cannot be quietly rewritten or softened by palace messaging. At this point, no courtier, no senior royal, and no title carries the authority to undo what was set in motion after 90 years of service and silence. And if this story continues unfolding the way insiders suggest, every piece that surfaces next will carry even more weight than the last. Comment and subscribe.